Good morning. My name is Mark Silverman. I'm the Secretary Treasurer of the CBA, and I'm sitting in on behalf of Chairwoman Sunny Youngson Park, Chair of the CBA's Enforcement Program Oversight Committee. And I'd like to call our meeting to order. Let's start by taking a roll.
Luz Molina Lopez.
Mark Silverman.
Alicia Berja.
Jose Campos.
Xochitl León.
Okay, with that, we have a quorum. Agenda item 1 is approval of the minutes of September 14th, 2017, Enforcement Program Oversight Committee meeting. Can we have a motion?
I move approval of minutes.
Okay, Mr. Campos, Ms. Leon seconded. Can we call for the vote? Oh, any public comment on the minutes? Okay, with that, we'll call for the vote.
Alicia Berja.
Yes.
Jose Campos.
Yes.
Xochitl León.
Yes.
Luz Molina Lopez.
I abstain.
Carola Nicholson.
Yes.
Mark Silverman.
Yes. With that, the motion carries. Agenda item 2 is a staff update regarding violations of Title 16 California Code of Regulations, Section 87A1, minimum annual continuing education requirement. Mr. Franzella, please begin your presentation.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So, as the chair had said, the purpose of this agenda item is to provide the CBA with information regarding implementation of CBA regulations, Section 87A1, which we commonly refer to, and I'll be referring throughout this informational item as a 20 and 12 requirement. For your reference, CBA regulations, Section 87A1 is included in Attachment 1 to your materials. The 20 and 12 requirement mandates that licensees complete a minimum of 20 hours of continuing education in each year of the 2-year license renewal period, with a minimum of 12 hours in technical subject matter or subject areas. And this requirement, this 20 and 12 requirement, took effect back in January 1, 2010. And licensees were required to report compliance with the 20 and 12 requirement, beginning with renewals that occurred on and after December 31st, 2011. And since 2009, the 20 and 12 requirement has been put in numerous update articles. It's in numerous booklets and handbooks and guides, as well as the license renewal application and the instructions. And what we're seeking what we're doing at this particular point is going forward is all 20 and 12 violations will be referred to the board's enforcement division for evaluation. So as a way of a little bit of history, the 20 and 12 violations have historically been identified in the renewal unit. And currently the renewal unit issues a warning letter for first-time violations. The warning letter explains the requirements in detail, demonstrates how it is calculated, and advises the future violations could result in enforcement action. And if there's a subsequent violation of the requirement, those are what are referred over to the board's enforcement division for review, and each violation is then reviewed on a case-by-case basis. And presently, enforcement referrals may warrant sometimes an additional warning letter or informational letter, or the issuance of a citation and fine. The 20 and 12 requirement has now been in effect for 8 years, and staff anticipate 4th violations to start occurring, as we've already had 3-time violators of this particular requirement. And as I mentioned earlier, going forward, we are having all license renewal applications identified of violation of the 20 and 12 requirement to be referred to the board's enforcement division for evaluation on a case-by-case basis. And the enforcement division will handle all first time and repeat going forward. And enforcement division may issue a warning letter, could issue a citation and fine, or for subsequent violations. At some point, these matters could elevate to a referral to the Office of the Attorney General for the filing of an accusation. According to the CBA's disciplinary guidelines and model orders, The minimum penalty for violations of the 20 and 12 requirement is additional CE courses, and the maximum penalty is revocation. Additionally, licensees who fail to meet the 20 and 12 requirement may be in violation of Business and Professions Code Section 5100G, which is willful violation of the Accountancy Act, which we provided an attachment to your materials. This doesn't require any specific action on the board, but as this will have an impact in terms of the enforcement program, as well as numbers you'll be seeing in your enforcement activity report, we wanted to bring it to the board's attention. Staff have no recommendation, and at this point, I'd like to turn it back over to the chair and answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Mr. Franzella?
I wanted to make sure I understood. You're saying all violations will automatically be referenced or referred to enforcement,
Correct.
even if it's a first-time violation?
Correct.
For someone who's been compliant for 8 years but had an inadvertent thing. So I've got a couple thoughts on this. I mean, I'm just trying to think of the prioritization and the, really of what do we want to include in the enforcement side. I would think if you've got first-time violators in this, I'm guessing it's going to be somewhat inadvertent. I'm guessing it might be a brand-new licensee that maybe didn't fully appreciate what they had to do in that first year. But absent any other issue with their renewal, I don't understand why we would have just continued with the warning letter process, unless that's creating an issue in the licensing division to keep pace with. So that's one thought. Second thought is, again, being cognizant of what we already deal with on the enforcement side, is I would, and it sounds like to issue a citation, it has to go into the enforcement division to then accomplish that. And I would continue to utilize the citation process as a primary stick to try and get compliance, as opposed to really, we would need a very severe situation that takes us into a AG type referral to use resources on that front is my reaction.
So from the AG side of things, I'm not, first-time violations, by all intents and purposes, I wouldn't see would rise to that level. It's really, we're coming up on fourth-time violations, potentially in the future fifth-time, but at some point citation and fine loses its no longer being used to correct the violation and something more severe, and the only thing left the board has is to move down that path. But for the first-time violations, I think this is the only requirement, CE requirement, that's treated differently than when a violation occurs and it can't be rectified, because unlike ethics or regulatory review or a shortage of hours where you can rectify the deficiency, this is, you can't make that up. Time has passed.
Time machine.
And so it's a violation that we would, if it gets referred over to enforcement, as our plan is, we would simply assess. I'm not saying we would even issue citations on every occasion. Sometimes it would be a matter of issuing a warning letter, because I think part of staff's perspective is this has been in place for 8 years, or 8 years now, multiple renewals, that it's in the PC, or it's in the regulatory review course, it's in the California ethics requirement that individuals have to take when they get licensed. It's not an unknown requirement that sometimes we see violations that they're an hour short. Sometimes we see they took all 80 hours in the second year, and there could be reasons to issue a citation for first-time violation where there isn't on other ones, and rather than have renewals try to make some assessment on their end, which is not their area, it would come to the board's enforcement division to evaluate them and implement a similar process, but sometimes first violations could conceivably warrant.
How much latitude do you have on citations in terms of size of the citation, especially if you're approaching a fourth violation or what have you?
So $100 to $5,000. So a pretty large.
I mean, I think that's the mechanism to utilize. You keep upping that, as opposed to investigation and some of this other stuff
Agreed.
that we would have to do, right? And you'd have to monitor the egregiousness of the violation
Agreed.
on it, right? So.
Yeah, I think there'd be numerous factors we would take into consideration even before we'd issue the citation. But we have a large range in which to issue those citations.
Okay.
Ms. Burrow?
Why the jump between 2016 and 2017? I mean, obviously it makes sense why, the numbers were kind of going up and down when this was first implemented. But I'm curious about how it was 14% in 2016, 19% in 2017, and are you seeing any changes so far this year?
To my knowledge, this is still an ongoing problem. As you can see, from 2014 on, it's pretty much been in the 1,700 to 1,300 range. It's not been going down all that much. So it's still an ongoing issue, and that's kind of part of the reason why it's a big workload on renewals to manage this particular violation piece. And so as to why it continues to happen, I don't know. I don't know why it's happening a fourth time for some individuals. All we can do is assess them on a case-by-case basis and try to seek correction somehow or change their mindset.
So this speaks to an automated renewal system where you automatically include these things, and maybe it automatically triggers your penalty for not having complied with 2012 versus a manual input that your team's having to go through right now, right?
I support any level of automation. But just to put board members at ease, if that's at all, I have no reservations or concerns on the workload within the enforcement division to handle this. It's going to be a volume. It'll probably increase by 1,000 to 1,300 referrals a year, but I don't see it as being at all an issue for my team. Otherwise, we would have other discussions internally. So we're well positioned to take this workload on.
Any other comments from board members? Any comments from the public?
So I just want to be clear from a overall CBA operational perspective. If we move the work from one group to your group, overall, is there a win from an efficiency perspective, or we're just moving the issue from one set of house to the other?
We do, actually. We, on an ongoing basis, we're always assessing board-wide what the resource needs are in each of the divisions, the level of staff, the talents that we have, and where best to place them. Right now, it so happens for this type of work, the enforcement division has staff who can perform this work, whereas we have seen recently in the licensing division that our processing timeframes are going up above where we want to see them, above our 30-day. In part, this will help with that issue, but also we did a couple years ago redirect a large number of staff within the board to the enforcement division so that we could get it appropriately staffed. And so I would say that's probably something that we do almost on a daily basis, kind of reassess our priorities, where we're at, staffing needs. It's part of our daily operations. Quick question, just for some clarity. What group currently does this, if it's not the enforcement division?
It's both. Licensing does some aspect of it, and enforcement does another portion of it. Just depends on the where it lands: first violation, second violation, repeat violations. But the numbers that you see on the paper where we talk about first-time violations, that's primarily all housed in the licensing division at this time. But subsequents are the ones that come to us.
So the licensing division handles first-time offenses to this rule, and then the second, third, fourth goes to enforcement?
Correct. And going forward, we're having them all come over to enforcement to evaluate.
And I might just clarify that in the license renewal unit that processes license renewal, one of the functions that they perform is when a renewal comes in that has a continuing education deficiency, the staff work diligently with the licensee to bring them into compliance, and that will continue. This will not change that. The difference with the 2012 violation is there's no way to go back and resolve that deficiency. If they come in with less than 80 or missing technical courses, we can work with them to remedy that. This is just a circumstance that there's really no way to go back and resolve that in time. So that's the difference why some we view more appropriately in the enforcement division, and those other violations will continue to be resolved in license renewal.
Can I inquire as to the reasons why people don't get the 20 and 12?
Yes.
Are they?
I honestly, some of it is, and we've learned over time, they continue to get calendar year versus renewal years, your 2-year period, but we've done considerable outreach to affect informational handbooks, applications. Some of our warning letters deal with that, because there's sometimes you can review applications and clearly see that an individual considered the 2-year or the 2-year period to be a calendar year, and we'll take opportunities to educate them. But as to why you have some people who do all 80 hours at the end, I assume busy
Yeah.
is all I can, if I'm gonna have to venture a guess.
Thank you.
Yeah, just given the nature of the profession, reading regulations and conforming to regulations, one would think that members of the profession will get it,
Right.
certainly after 1 or 2 mistakes, and recurring mistakes really raise a red flag as to
Right.
that there could be a real problem with that particular licensing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Franzel. I believe we have a member of the public that would like to comment, subject to the same time constraints as previously.
Oh, this is just on what he was talking about.
Just on the item.
Oh, okay, you
Joanne-
just want to comment on
Joanne
that?
Hinkle.
Okay, sure.
I would say automate all you can for the enforcement department. Their time is needed for more innovative work. And when I called into the enforcement department, my ear was chewed about how over busy they were and didn't have time. So I would say do all you can to save your enforcement people for the important work and automate everything you possibly can. Just up the price, up the price, up the price. And maybe take away their right to sign IRS forms or something, I don't know.
Thank you. Closing business, are there any agenda items that you'd like to see on the next meeting? Members of the public?
Can I make one more comment?
Yes.
Joanne Hinkle, and I found a wonderful law in business and profession codes that I am requesting to be brought into the Board of Accountancy rules of professional conduct. In addition to any liability for a civil penalty pursuant to Section 17206, a person who violates this chapter and the acts of unfair competition and accounting services treatment, I'm going to ask my senator to add, perpetuated against one or more senior citizens or disabled persons may be liable for a civil penalty not to exceed $2,500 for each violation, which may be assessed and recovered in a civil action as prescribed in Section 17206. So I would ask that California Code of Regulations, Article 9, Rules of Professional Conduct, Compliance with Standards, license engaged in the practice of public accountancy shall comply with all applicable professional standards, including but not limited to generally accepted accounting principles and generally accepted auditing standards. Licensees are responsible to conduct services for disabled persons and senior citizens per Business and Professional Code, Division 7, Part 2, Chapter 5, Enforcement 17206.1. Also, my goal is to include training for rights of the disabled in your ethics books for training. It's not covered whatsoever. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So I will turn in a letter for future agenda items. Thank you.
Thank you. Evidently, this meeting is adjourned.